A discussion by Bridge Authority Commissioners regarding my email sent asking about the process to replace land lost in Hood River County with land elsewhere.
Issue that she brings up is that if we use property, which we can, on the Washington side for 6F, the Oregon people don't get the benefit of that recreational area on the Oregon side. You would get it on the Washington side, but not on the Oregon side.
Yeah, I think generally that was her concern, was mitigating the property on the Washington side instead of on the Oregon side.
Just to start with, so
Do we need to read
property
this
that we're
into the
talking
record?
about. What's that?
I'm sorry, do we need to read this into the record?
No, it's part of the record. You can put it in the record. But the but as we discuss it, it would be nice if we discuss in a way that people can understand what we're talking about. So the property that is my understanding, this has to do with the relocation of the port onto other port property, and so that's.
I was going to give an update on it. You want me to kind of give the background on what's going on? And I was going to do that after.
She asked some good questions, and she asked about what the 6F mitigation process looks like. And one of the specific concerns she had, which I emailed her about, was she was talking about it was described that the mitigation could be towards a future park on the Washington side. She knows nothing of the discussions, the fact that this is actually an actively discussed project in White Salmon. So it sounds on the surface like you're talking about a mitigation to a park which doesn't even exist. But for the last, since
she may not know
I told her
discussions.
I told her that since Dave Poucher was mayor, this has been under discussion, and that one of the possibilities is that if this funding could be part of the package to make the park come into existence. Right. So the mitigation would be for an actual park versus a imaginary park, but then there's still the question that she asks about who benefits from it.
Correct. So, and we're working through the 6F. So the 6F was a protection that was put, a recreational protection that was put on the port facilities back when they took the land grants back in the 70s.
So that's what I'm confused about. So 1963 is when the Army Corps of Engineers built the first fill, and the port.
This is due to I'm going to use an acronym. Because I can't ever remember
but I don't live close to
LCWF.
Land and Water Conservation
Funds. That's it.
Federal funding.
So it was federal funding. In order to obtain that federal funding, you had to allocate the property that you owned as 6F property.
Okay.
And recreational property. So the port did that. Not, back in the 70s when they did it.
And this was the whole. This is the launching ramp.
They built a boat ramp. They built.
The sack that Nancy gave me.
Please.
Yes.
So they built the boat ramp and they extended some utilities with the funding. It was, I think, less than $15,000 that they had taken in, but it then encumbered that whole area.
Which includes where the port office is.
Your lunch?
Correct. So it was all of where the port's office sits, all around
Do we have the lunch?
all around the inlet there, the part where the Marina Greens is at, the DMV buildings,
right,
all the way down that other side and then out the hook. Not right, but outside that the launch area. Why is that?
Hey, whoever's talking on virtual, could you mute, please?
I thought you could just right click and hit mute.
Okay, it's muted now.
Thank you.
Okay. So all of that was included. It was a very rough sketch. So we went back and worked with NPRD or OPRD and NPS, Oregon Forest Division and National Park Service to identify the boundaries. We also mitigated with them what was in the boundary and what was not in the boundary. So we have gotten concurrence that the DMV building, the parking in front of the Department of Motor Vehicles building, and the that gray building that's out there.
Yep.
Marina One.
Or in Marina One were not
They were not,
included,
okay.
and those were exempted out.
And then the ports building,
Facility,
Yep.
support building, all of that area is within it.
okay,
However, it's a non-conforming use that was never mitigated for.
okay. And do you know how it was allowed to be built?
No,
Okay,
no, we just know that it was there. We tried to get it ruled as exempt, and OPRD and MPS came back and said no, that it was a non-conforming use.
okay.
So that would have to be mitigated for,
Because the bridge is going to go across it.
so the bridge is going to come across it and
Right.
basically remove that non-conforming use
Right.
of the property.
Right.
It's a value for value, not a area for area conversion.
Okay.
So we are having the appraisers give us a kind of, I'll call it initial fair market value of that property, just so we know roughly what amount that property will be valued at.
And they don't value it as recreation property.
No, they value it as, it's probably not the exactly right term, but basically vacant land that could be used for anything. So best use,
Right.
right terms for that, best use of that property.
Fallacy to that.
But
you
yeah,
can't
it's
use,
kind of obvious, but,
Yeah.
but on both sides though,
right?
right? So
So they
land
value
coming in and that's going out are both in the same
same way.
condition.
Same baseline.
So they'll value it, then we will know how much we have to mitigate for. And then we can start looking at the properties and we will have to get those evaluated. And values put on them to determine an equal amount.
Right.
We don't know what that value is right now, so once
Right.
we know that, then we can start looking at other properties. So one property that was brought up was the property on the Washington side. That is a potential property. We will have to work with OPRD and MPS if we want to, if the authority chooses that that's the property they would like to mitigate, they will have to get.
So it's our decision or it's our application.
You can recommend that that's the property you would like to. You have to get concurrence that it meets the requirements.
Got it.
And then put the 6F restrictions on it for recreational use.
So a question for you, the property on the Washington side, that's for the most part Clickitat County?
Yes,
Okay, and if Clickitat County would donate that, it would certainly help us out trying to find funding.
well,
Yeah, so wait a minute though, you guys are going to the answer.
yeah,
And what we're trying to do is address the process.
Right.
Yeah.
And address Tracy's kind of concern.
yeah. So
You
Tracy.
can't start with an answer there. We
Right.
gotta kind of work.
So that's one property that'll be identified. It's not the only one. So once the properties are determined that are equal value, then the authority will have to make a decision as to which ones they would like to move forward with. And then they will have to get concurrence that those are properties that they deem to be mitigated.
Well, if you're gonna mitigate port property, you have to get port approval, don't you?
The port would have to agree to use that property as mitigation property and put a 6F encumbrance on it. But the authority will work with OPRD and make the decision on what properties are used for mitigation. The impacted facility doesn't get to make that decision. They're just an impacted facility. So the authority will have to say, hey, we would like to mitigate here, here, and here. Right? And then OPRD and NPS would have to concur that, yes, that is. The owners of whatever those properties are would have to agree that, yes, they'll put 6F, they'll use it as recreation.
What's your
And so the
schedule for
reason-
getting the,
I think they gave them notice to proceed on the fair market value last week. So we'll get that fair market value in and then we'll start moving through that process. It'll take a few months to get through the whole
Oh,
thing.
So this is
assessment? It shouldn't take 2 months to do an assessment.
Keels on, who's that?
this is Doug. I have a question more on the assessment. So how is the property currently zoned and wouldn't that have an impact on the value?
There's no bearing.
I believe that they will, Doug, have to take that into account. They will they do, and I'm not familiar with this, I just know the term. They will have to determine using what they call yellow book process to determine the valuation of the property. So once they do that, once they get the appraisal and the fair market value, we can bring that back to the authority to take action on it. And then we can answer all those questions about how that value was determined. But there is a very defined process by OPRD and MPS on how you value these properties. And then our appraisers will have to follow those processes. So we can come back and brief you all on how the property was and the value was determined. But I'm assuming they will take into account zoning of the property.
So if I could kind of summarize, we've got 4 entities that have to all agree
At least.
on property that is unmitigated and what we're going to mitigate it with and balance all of that out.
Right.
So it's basically 4 to 6 agencies to do that. The other thing that I think Tracy is kind of putting in her email is a concern that the port, when they made their deal, they didn't kind of follow through with the rules. And so we have to mitigate the rules because we're going to use it, but there's also a potential mitigation that has to be done by the port in addition to.
No, that's not true.
Trying to point
The
out.
port does not have to mitigate unless the bridge project does not do it for them.
I think that is Tracy's concern, though, that the port made a mistake years and years ago, and the bridge authority may decide to mitigate that on Washington. And her feeling is that then the Oregon side is left out because of the port's previous mistake.
So for a little clarity, this started because of Kevin Greenwood, the port director, making a comment. And so just to understand his role in this, I think Kevin is trying to be helpful in trying to understand what the possible full range of mitigations might be. And because he knows all the properties around, he's looking at other things that might be usable. And specifically, he wanted to know if it was a possibility to use this Washington land. Not that it's his decision, not that it's his plan, but hey, is this within the realm of possibility?
So we had brought this up early on when we started and presented it to the port as a potential. Originally, OPRD and National Park Service, they are not totally on board with that because you're mitigating outside of the governing agency. It is not a requirement. We have to submit a request to them and they have to approve for us to go outside of that area to do the mitigation. So that's why there's more steps to this. Also, one of the things that she said in here about parking lots, if that parking lot supports a recreational area, then it is considered part of it. So just because it's a parking lot, you can't make it grass and then call it a recreational. If it's already serving a recreational purpose as a parking lot, that still counts.
So if the parking lot was paved and striped and it's supporting recreational use,
that could be a mitigation element. And if there's portions of, and I think Kevin has identified some portions of the port properties that have not ever been used as recreation that might be able to be converted to that. If the port's willing to do that, then yes, those could be considered as well. But the first step is to figure out the value that we're mitigating for, and then figure out how much property and where we would like to mitigate. Wetlands is another thing. Wetlands can be used as a mitigating element if they want to do that, if that's what everybody would choose.
And Kevin was asking me about several wetlands around the river area.
And that could be something that was done as well. So there's options as to what we mitigate, but it is my opinion is the authority is the one who has to
now,
work with MPRD.
Is this done on financial amount, or is it also done by square foot?
Just purely dollar. Purely based on the appraisal values.
And we do not know what that dollar amount is yet.
Correct.
So when we know that dollar amount, then we will start the process of
Identifying property, appraising property,
considering what
Various properties that are available.
what works, coming up with possible options for the authority to propose for concurrence.
because you will have to go get those properties appraised. So you'll want to think about how many, you don't want to do 50 of
You know,
them. You need to go think about what's a reasonable number that you would want to go get appraised to get to that, but you have to do whatever that amount is.
Right.
So if it's $1 million, then you do $1 million.
That's the
5 million, then it's 5 million.
Yeah, and so I'd be thrilled when we're at that point.
Yes.
The fact that we're moving forward with the bridge and that the construction's on a path, that we're working through the right of way issues, the mitigation issues, that will mean that we're in a wonderful place. We have to get there.
Yep.
Let's jump ahead here a little bit. Dan Bates has to leave us here in a few minutes. So Dan, can you